Again, we're going to be talking about users in the new work from home environment and the new checks that need to be in place to support this environment. So the work from home environment, it's been around for a little bit now, right? Excuse me. The revolution kind of has just started. It wasn't planned for, it wasn't organized, and while some were better prepared than others for it, there's been a huge shift for organizations and, of course, for their staff as well. The reality is that um, reality is that most of the millions of employees and their companies around the world have transitioned suddenly to remote work, and the situation is still highly fluid. And while there are initial challenges of just getting people connected have been conquered, it's still very much an ad hoc situation for most of the companies that we've engaged with and spoken with. So. Even for those that are well prepared, there's still a lot of challenges. Obviously, a lot of organizations are now forced to do BYOD. So whether that's personal computers or personal mobile devices, those are all things that you have to take into consideration. Being able to configure that hardware and those systems, and being able to buy and ship those laptops out to the staff are all things that people have been battling with. There have been unclear chains of authority associated with that, and unreviewed and immature permission sets and access lists have led to best guesses of how organizations should roll this out effectively. And the adoption of technologies that weren't widely used before, like today's Zoom technology that we're using today for this video conference, the wide scale usage of VPNs and things like remote VDI desktop solutions are all becoming a lot more popular now. But there's still, in many cases, most companies have lost the layers of security that they had in place with their on-premise deployments, and now they're dependent upon single solutions like maybe a VPN, and those companies that had good disaster recovery plans were typically expecting just to accommodate maybe a single branch or an office where they have to support them for alternative locations. They weren't expecting to have to support the entire company in one big shift. So these are the challenges that of course, that we're seeing today. And that presents new risks, of course. All of this creates a huge problem for organizations, for newly deployed devices. Perhaps the configuration isn't as good as that they normally expected. And the case of companies telling the staff to just go out and buy a laptop and expense it so you can do work, that doesn't lead to a very secure environment. You don't know if someone is using their own personal device, whether the device has been compromised or not. Who knows what else is going on in that environment, and whether there's poor security hygiene in general. You're dealing with home routers, you're dealing with keeping up with patching, and there's gaps in supervision, in monitoring and auditing capabilities that you had when it was an office environment. So all these things are new risks that companies have to deal with. These risks actually can lead to very dangerous situations for companies because of the inability for them to detect scenarios that keep the CISOs and their security teams up at night. So whether it's accessing data or systems by unintended users, it can be very tempting to just look something up on a computer that you're having a dispute. Someone you're having a dispute with. Maybe you're working from your home office environment. There are other people around, whether it's your family members or others that might want to have access to your computer while it's sitting there. You've walked away from it. So there's illicit or malicious activity by potentially by insiders or people who've shared their login information. The recent Twitter breach, of course, is a good example of that one. And inadvertent or innocuous but harmful work activity are all things that need to be taken into account right now. So what are the new checks that are needed to ensure a secure work environment? All organizations need to be performing new additional checks for their remote users in order to help them ensure that the security of the organization, and that there really are 3 checks that need to be performed now that we can't actually see, turn and see who is sitting next to you at your desk. You need to have the ability to do these three new checks. So the first of these new checks is of course the human check. So in the case of the human check, there's also after that there's what we call the continuous check, and following the continuous check, there's the compliance check. So what do these mean? So I'll delve into these a little bit more. The human check is you want to know that there's an actual human sitting behind that keyboard, and it's not a bot or script or some other automated process at the other end of the connection. Now, you also need to know if it's a human, is it the right human user at the other end of that connection? You want to make sure it's an authorized user. You want to make sure it's not a family member or a friend or an unauthorized contractor that has access to your systems. So that, excuse me, that loss of intrinsic authentication that happens in an office situation where Bob is sitting at his desk, you need to be able to account for that now. And we've also heard genuine concerns about, the home worker where a partner or family member may have access to a company device now, and the device is not always locked. So you just need to make sure that there's no rogue access to corporate resources going on in these types of work from home environments. And we've actually had cases where if you look at not only employees, but you look at the third-party contractors that are being relied on more and more, we've seen cases where third-party contractors have been interviewed, reference checked, and security cleared, and then they're switched out for somebody else to actually perform the work. So you need to be able to identify that person behind the keyboard is who they say they are, and that's been a current a theme throughout this webinar today. And finally, there's the continuous check. With the continuous check, I should say, is it still the right human user? So you have your initial login and your authentication, but what happens after that initial login? How do you know that that user is still that person behind the desk doing the work that they're supposed to be doing 15 minutes after a login, 2 hours, or 6 hours after a login? And that has all to do with being able to continually authenticate a user, but without doing it in a way that's cumbersome or prevents the user from doing their work. So can you be sure at any given time, all day long, at all times, that the user is who they say they are? It's interesting to note that one of the trends for NIST is under NIST 800-207, they talk about zero trust, and zero trust mentions multiple mentions of the ability to continuously authenticate users for every action or every access that they do. But you need to be able to do that, in a way that doesn't impede the ability to do work. So that's another avenue that we look at when we look at these three checks. And then there's the compliance check. Are there records to verify this conclusion? Can you tell and verify that a user has been there throughout the day, that is actually that user for every interaction that user does? Are you able to prove that in a kind of a non-reputable manner? So all of that's important, to be able to demonstrate that responsibly, and be able to not just say it was their credentials that were used, but it was actually that person who was behind the keyboard doing that work, or doing something that they shouldn't be doing for that matter. So without these checks, and these checks really asking is can you provide assurance that sensitive work and data and systems are all secure despite the transition to a work from home environment? So without these checks, you're going to be able to, without these checks, are you going to be able to detect unauthorized or illicit forms of automation, things like hacks and unauthorized scripts and ad hoc RPA are all things that organizations need to be concerned with. Are you able to detect unauthorized human users? And things like walking away from computer or lost or misplaced devices are always a risk. Having other people who are in a household environment to have access to that device that has access to your network is going to also be a concern for organizations. Things like unauthorized license sharing, allowing other users to use licensed office resources. That's going to cost the company money as well. And unsupervised and unapproved contracting or subcontracting, like I had mentioned earlier. So the ability to provide defensible records that the intended authorized user was using an account. The responsibility for actions can be determined with certainty, and that your workforce is secure in the absence of an in-office presence are all challenges that exist today. And answering these questions today may actually reveal additional cracks in your security process. So it's good to be asking these questions on a continuous basis. So that really leads to the question of what technologies can enable strong identity checks remotely, uh, which enable strong identity or authentication in this remote environment that we're in. So identity assurance technologies are pretty much, in short, what's going to help lead you down this path. The ability to recognize humans and not just credentials, the ability to prove that it was or wasn't the right person, and biometrics is going to be that technology that can solve this. So there are two types of technologies in the biometric space today that most people are familiar with. There's static biometrics that we've been talking a lot about today that include fingerprint scans and facial scans and retinal scans that are, a measurement of physical characteristics of a person. We're very familiar with all of these technologies. We use them a lot on the mobile phones or on the mobile phone. Everyone has a fingerprint reader on their mobile devices. In terms of using it with a PC, that requires additional hardware purchases. So these are things that all measure static shape of the body in some way, and they're pretty secure. But as we've been talking about, there are ways to defeat the biometric traditional biometrics that have been proven out there in the marketplace. So there's another approach that people are less familiar with, which is approach that Plurilock focuses on, which is behavioral biometrics, which while it's less understood, it's becoming increasingly more adopted. And these are measures of movement over time. So things like how you walk, how you talk, how you type, how you move your mouse, how you hold your phone, even things like your heartbeat. These are all things that can be measured and that can be basically that you can use these behavioral biometric traits to identify a unique individual user. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Although static biometrics versus behavioral biometrics, there is an already widely adopted deployed in BYOD. You have the static biometrics, like I mentioned, but they're typically not enough because they don't pass the 3 new checks. They only know identity for a moment in time, and generally they're too intrusive for anything that you do other than this single check. You can't constantly be asking somebody to use their fingerprint for every application they access. So check one: is it a human? Is it the right human? Yes, static can tell you that. However, for check 2, the continuous check, is it still the right human all day long? No, static biometrics really can't tell you that, although you could get somewhat close with some of the biometric sensors, but these are generally intrusive and therefore they can't be performed more than really a handful of times. And for check 3, the compliance check, was it the right human at any given time when something bad has happened? Static biometric capabilities can't really give you the answer to that. With behavioral biometrics, though, only behavior is going to allow you to do any sort of continuous identity assurance in a way that's invisible to users. And to help you pass the 3 new checks, you're able to, with behavior, because you can leverage things that already exist, like your keyboard, like your mouse movement, and you'll be able to actually leverage that capability for those biometric signals that you get from the typing patterns that individuals have that are unique to individuals, and the way that individuals move their mouse and click and point. These are all things that do address those 3 checks: the human check, the continuous check, and the compliance check. So it's all well and good. So what are the practical considerations to consider here? So privacy, of course, is always a concern when using technologies such as these. So, fingerprints and cameras and monitoring of user activities. If a biometric thing like a fingerprint is stolen, it can be very difficult to change that, right? It's kind of just, it's there and it's out in the wild. Whereas it's really a different situation with behavioral biometrics. So the way that I type in my user ID and password, if I change my user ID or I change my password, that's going to invalidate the original way of entering those credentials, and you can much easily more control that environment. So logistically, if you're dealing with traditional biometrics, shipping out readers and shipping out things like USB fobs. Um, those are just a little bit with the logistics of that. It can create a lot more cost and overhead issues dealing with those types of activities. From a compliance perspective, the the ensuring users authenticate correctly, not adding extra steps to a workday, making sure solutions meet external compliance standards, whether it's NIST, ISO, or PCI, and so forth, are all part of the uh, the activities you need to kind of keep track of here. So behavioral biometrics, a practical example. One way to practically use behavioral biometrics without requiring expensive hardware or intrusive monitoring is to use the existing keyboard and mouse. This passes the logistics challenge. The user already has them. It's convenient as the user doesn't need to do anything else. And if implemented well, it's very privacy friendly. There are more ways of doing it, of course, but fundamentally, whatever you choose needs to answer this question at all times. Is it really them? So in terms of how behavioral biometrics works, an example of this is how you type on a keyboard over a period of time is pretty unique to you. The micro patterns and how long you press keys for, how long it takes to move between a set of keys, be that group of, a few, 2, 3, or 4 or more, these can all be analyzed and is often referred to as keystroke dynamics. Often similarly in a similar aspect on the mouse, measurements of how you move the mouse, how fast you accelerate with your mouse, the directions and distances you travel, how you click, how you double click, how you drag and drop things. These can all be combined to answer fundamental questions and show, is it really that person behind the computer doing those actions? So behavioral biometrics aligns with these checks. The human check, is this a human user, and is this the right user? Behavioral biometric also it aligns with the continuous check in that is it still the right human user? Keystroke and is it still is it still the right human user? And if they pass the continuous check, you'll allow the retrospectively for auditing and compliance, it should show a log showing that the right person was biometrically verified to be the one performing the task. So every single task all day long, if someone has stepped in for a moment or someone else has stepped in for a moment, you should be able to clearly define the differentiation between those two individuals. So you need to be able to pass that compliance check, and behavioral biometrics allows you to do that. So what does this look like in a real world situation, a real world solution? At login, we have two solutions. We have our Plurilock Adapt solution. So Plurilock Adapt is used as an MFA solution at initial login. Keystroke, we leverage keystroke dynamic biometrics, but we combine that with other signals as well. So we leverage things like your geolocation. Could you possibly have logged in from your last successful login from the same from a plausible geographic travel distance. From a network perspective, we look at the IP address, we look at the browser you're coming in on. So all these factors combined allow us to make a determination, is this the right individual logging in at that point in time, and whether to make an allow or deny decision in that process. So this is strength. This is for the human check at login. This is knowing that it's a human, knowing that it's the right human user, and does so frictionlessly. So we don't need any additional. There's no hardware devices needed. There's no additional login steps to navigate. It's essentially invisible to the user. The user just logs in how he normally does. And if he doesn't pass his biometric authentication challenge, you have the ability with our solution to step up authentication to either a mobile app solution that we can provide, or an existing solution that might be in place, whether it's a USB fob solution, a traditional biometric solution, whatever solutions exist today for MFA, we can interact with and work with pretty easily. So on the continuous authentication side, we also have a product called Defend, which invisibly authenticates users after you've initially logged in. And that leverages both keystroke biometrics as well as mouse pointer biometrics. But that works continuously in the background, invisibly checking on users every few seconds to make sure that that user is still the right user. And it helps you basically address the past both the human compliance check of knowing who it was all day long, and that you have the records, the non-reputable records to do this. And it does so without adding support loads. So there's no interruptions to the user. The user just goes about his normal workday, and he is being authenticated in the background. And the company has the ability to, based on seeing anomalies, saying, hey, do we want to step up and challenge this user, or do we maybe want to lock this user out of the system immediately because we've identified him as a rogue user? So all of this is possible with a continuous authentication solution. Wrong biometrics during the regular, again, I think I just kind of chatted about this, that the user's locked out within seconds, potentially. You can do that either on a manual or an automated basis. And identity failure records are kept automatically for every moment of the day. So you can go back with an auditor and prove that this particular user was the person doing the actions that are being recorded. So in summary, a quick recap, again, work from home checks. And again, you need to have the human check of, is this a human user, and is it the right human user? The continuous check of, is it still the right human user after you have that initial login? And is it still the right human user, all day long as they're working throughout their entire work session? And the ability to have records that verify that and that are non-reputable in nature. So that's pretty much the overview that I wanted to give today. Any questions? Certainly happy to entertain questions on how behavioral biometrics works.